Hey everybody, welcome to a special episode of First Issue Club, an interview edition. We are very excited to have our guest today. You may know some of his work from Marvel and DC. He's done independent work on Boom and Image. Today we're going to talk to him about his new book coming out, Godkillers, on Aftershock. We are very, very excited to have him on the show. Mark Sable, how you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. We are very excited to talk to you about your work and your new book coming out today, this week, Godkillers. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You scared me for a second, and I said, oh boy, I should have picked up my own comic at the store today. And, thankfully, I didn't miss it.
Sorry, I get a little excited when I talk to creators. It's such a unique position that we're in with this show. We get to talk to people that are in the industry who we admire, and you're obviously someone that we admire and want to be on the show, so I'm a little flustered, so bear with me.
So Mark, I'll get more flustered, so it makes you feel better.
Perfect. Mark, you're in LA right now? Is that correct?
I am. I'm originally from New York. I live in LA now. I still, even though I've been in LA like 17 or something years, I still think of myself as a New Yorker. I don't know if that ever changes, but although I like it here. Yeah. So yes, I'm in LA.
I saw you tweeting about the Knicks, so I was like, there's two Knicks fans on this podcast as well. So
no, really?
Yes, I'm originally from New Jersey, but so I was.
First of all, I'm so sorry.
Oh, I know, right?
I'm both excited and I'm like, oh, like nobody should have to like share that misery.
We don't hold it against them.
Yeah, it was only worse being a Chiefs fan, and that came around for us. I just guess to set this up, it's going to be Greg and Budget King on the interview today. We as a club had been kind of just staying with Aftershock and especially like and a lot of independent publishers and just kind of seeing like what new books are bubbling up and looking awesome. And Godkillers got on our radar. And so that was awesome. And we kind of just reached out to Mark, and Mark was like, yeah, I'm down to do an interview to set this up, and this book hasn't even come out yet, but we read it, you obviously wrote it, so we're here to talk about it, and we're pumped about it. Can you, for those, I guess just to kind of give a setup about the book, can you, in your own words, Mark, like tell us, like, what is Godkillers?
So the idea is, the high concept is it's a United States Special Forces team that fights insurgents who use mythical creatures as weapons of mass destruction, like supernatural weapons of mass destruction. So that's sort of the big overall concept. And then I think what hopefully makes it unique from a character perspective is that the main character is an Arab American who is in the Army Reserves. His day job is, when he's not fighting, is he's a folklorist. And even though he's an Arab American, he's raised Muslim, he has all these doubts about his faith. And so when he gets recruited, because, a large portion of insurgencies have to do with Islamic extremism, he gets recruited. It's sort of like, oh, imagine you're an atheist and you're like, okay, I'm okay with this worldview. But he also has this fear of death that's related to it. And then all of a sudden, like, okay, you think there's just oblivion. And then, okay, the good news is there's like the supernatural is real. But the bad news is, all he sees of it, at least at first, are the negative things, like these monsters, and I'm trying not to say all the names of the monsters because they kind of might be spoilery, but
don't spoil anything.
Yeah, but I think like there's some unique stuff. The first issue takes place in the Philippines, but if you've played like Dungeons and Dragons, you might know what the monster is. That'll be a hint. There's some stuff that are more traditional from the Islamic world, like I didn't even want to say it, that, like if you've read Arabian Nights, you might know. And then later on, I don't think there's too much of a spoiler that we get into some Russian stuff. And like it uses the supernatural stuff to kind of explore the war on terror. But it's hopefully just a fun book and not like, I don't have a particularly political agenda other than just, hey, this is really crazy stuff that's going on in the world right now. If you're interested in it more, you can read more about it.
You described it as Hellboy meets Zero Dark 30, and I thought that was like just the most brilliant description of this book I've ever heard. It sounds like these monsters are going to be like kind of regional specific, which like kind of gets me more excited that they're like just going to be globe-trotting around, taking care of these just kind of, like you said, these monstrous weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, I think, and that's part of what appealed to me about doing this is, so I had done a book, probably my last like big published book prior to last year, was a book I did called Graveyard of Empires, which is basically with Paul Azaceta, who's a tremendous artist and one of my best friends, who does Outcast now, and then Matt Wilson, the amazing Eisner-winning colorist. That book was basically Marines versus Taliban in Afghanistan. And I consider this book almost like a spiritual sequel. I mean, the story is in no way connected, but I think that's one of the things that excited me about this book was like, I just am, and we can talk about like, I do work with the military, but I'm also just very interested in conflict. So I just read about like all these regional conflicts that like, again, like there was this huge insurgency in the Philippines where this city, which you see in the first issue, the city named Merawi becomes under siege by this like ISIS affiliate. I consider myself super well read, but until maybe a year and a half ago, I had never heard of it. I felt like on the one hand, like, oh, this is a chance to explore all those things, but then it's also like, oh, like the folklore of these countries is interesting too. And I like the idea, like, I guess it's a question you didn't ask, but, and you probably would, but it's like, oh, well, where did the idea come from? Was like, this probably goes back to Iraq or maybe even before that. There was this, there's this army, I want to say a colonel or a general, I think he was a general, who got in trouble because he was like, and rightly so, but he was like interviewing an Al-Qaeda or insurgent suspect. He said, we know why we're going to win this war. This is an American general. And he's like, because our God's bigger than your God. And this was like a really religious Christian thing. And, it's bad enough to like, actually, you shouldn't, it's probably not a good interrogation technique. And, maybe a crime or whatever, but he went around bragging about it. I'm blanking on his name, which is probably good anyway. I don't think he needs the publicity, but I always thought in my head, I was like, oh, well, like how cool would that scene have been if like the guy said, no, my God is bigger. And then like, a djinn appeared or something like that. And I thought about that. And I thought about just like, oh, the idea that like, we go into all these countries and it's like a metaphor, like hopefully again, like you said, it's a fun book. And like, the monsters are exciting. And Monhouse, who's the artist, has just did killer designs for them. Yet, like, I feel like the fact that we don't know about the folklore as kind of these monsters. And so we need to have this Arab American as an expert and some other people who have other different ethnic and religious backgrounds. Like, is this metaphor for like just like how little we know of all these cultures that we're sending troops into? So that's a very long-winded answer.
That was great. I want to go into that a little. I definitely want to come back to the military stuff. So we're going to put a pin into that. But since you went there, one thing that I was talking about, Greg, about this book was that it ends how a first issue should end. Like it nailed it, and totally like leads you into like, oh yeah, I have to be getting issue 2. And then you do these like profiles of or a handful of the characters, which candidly sometimes I feel like authors will kind of just use to just like write all this shit that they couldn't fit into comic book form. But for me, this totally worked. It like fleshed out all these characters that you just met. And one thing that you do, which I loved and started looking for, was you explain where they're at in their spirituality. And in some ways, they were recruited because of their different spiritual beliefs. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm glad you like that. And I have to give credit where it's due because so Aftershock has basically, I think they've asked a number of creators on like for the first and second issues, like, oh, and they came to me and they were like, would you mind doing some back matter? And I think they originally came to me with the idea of like, oh, doing kind of a monster manual thing. But I was like, oh, the monsters are kind of like the issues are structured where a lot of times you're surprised at like who the monster is at the end of the issue. I think that's kind of how it works for issue 1. So I didn't want to do that, but I also knew like I had this huge cast and it gave me some space to explore the characters that, I mean, I try my best to give everybody, good amounts of time in the book, but I was happy to do that. And so hopefully it adds something. I also tried to write it in the form of like, it's a memo from like a national security advisor to an unnamed president, but there's like a voice to it, which is kind of like.
And you also delete words which we would see in public documents. Yeah.
So it was redacted. I mean, I literally went online and I looked at national security memos that were declassified, and I sent them like into the designer to be like, oh, can you make it look like this? And I try to format it like that. But to have a voice where it's all written by one of the characters to the president, and that character has his own biases, but is also his own agenda, but is also trying to please the president. So hopefully it makes for more than like, it was definitely inspired by, like, I'll be honest, like the G.I. Joe file cards. I was, a huge G.I. Joe fan as a kid, but I wanted it to have and those were all written by, oh my God, I'm blanking on his name and it's terrible. The great Larry Hama, who's just was an inspiration to me, like as a creator. He actually wrote all this, but I wanted them to read this, like, not like an information dump, but to like a little bit Easter eggy, but also to just feel like it's telling its own story that you can. I never want people to feel like they have to read back matter like that, because although I enjoy it, there is sometimes, like, I've been rereading Alan Moore's like Neonomicon, and I've already read it. I don't feel like, even though it's really brilliantly written stuff, like sometimes I just don't feel like reading through the journal. I just want to like skip and see more art in the next issue. So I want people to feel like they don't have to read it, but it's like a nice extra thing.
You have a gift of writing heady stuff in a non-pretentious way. Like that's how I felt reading this. Is I was like, whoa,
Thank you.
Getting hit with a lot. I mean, your level of research is insane. And we've seen that in a lot of your other work, but like, it's also very easy to just like jump into like, this is war, this is a horror book. It's a beautiful way that you have.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Let me get back to something though. So this is super fascinating to me. So explain what you do with the Atlantic Council and what the Art of Future Warfare project is.
Okay, so I'll back up to explain this weird way of how my like life has imitated art, has imitated life. So I did a book back, I want to say it was 2009, called Unthinkable for Boom, which was based on this real thing where there was this, after 9/11, where I lived in New York during 9/11. First of all, people were saying when it happened, we were all thinking like, it feels unreal. I mean, It's literally unthinkable. But people were saying like, this is something out of a Tom Clancy novel or a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. And the Department of Defense took that really seriously and started a think tank made up of screenwriters, novelists. So like the guy who created 24 was part of it. I believe, I want to say, I know like Brad Thor was, but oh man, Brad Meltzer, I think, was part of it. There may have been more than one think tank. But anyway, so my idea, and their idea was like, come up with worst case terror scenarios before the terrorists do. So maybe we can come up with ways to stop them, like think out of the box, basically. So the premise of Unthinkable was, well, what if like these writers came and these worst case scenarios started coming true? And it becomes this idea of this guy who's a writer who joins this fictional think tank, who is now trying to stop these terrorist things, but he's a writer. He's not an action hero. So that basically somehow got the attention of, the Atlantic Council is this nonpartisan think tank that deals with conflict, diplomacy, all this kind of interesting stuff. They're in DC. I got in touch with a writer there who works for them, named August Cole, who wrote a book called Ghost Fleet, which is this basically like a novel about World War III. Like, what if essentially like sort of if the Chinese did like this digital Pearl Harbor. Anyway, he's like, oh, this Unthinkable stuff, like that's really interesting, and did an interview with me, and I liked his book. And as part of this think tank, as part of the Atlantic Council, they have this thing called the Art of Future Warfare, which the idea is basically to take people who are in the arts. So, it could be writers, it could be artists, directors, video game designers. So like one of the Call of Duty people was involved in this, and to help partner them with the government, which can mean the military, it can mean the intelligence community, or just policymakers in general, and also people in science and business, and like help envision what the future of conflict might look like. So,
so you became your character.
Yeah. So it's the strangest thing. And it's been actually one of the greatest things that has happened to me in my life. Like, just because, first of all, I mean, I have such huge imposter syndrome. I'm slowly getting over it, where like, I'll be in a room with somebody and they're like, this person's a Navy SEAL, this person's an astronaut, this person is a nuclear submarine, commanded one. But what I like about it is that it's like, so you would think, okay, these are all going to be just these really right wing, hawkish people. And there's really a really good diversity of like I mean, politics very sort of rarely comes up. Like, it's just a really good diversity of thought, and also of just like, they try their best to get, have it just be racially and gender and all that kind of diverse too. And I think that's important because, when you think of, like, one of the first things I heard that really struck with me was like, okay, yes, a lot of it is like thinking about drones and robots and like nanotech and things like that. But it's like, okay, like one of the biggest factors in determining like how stable a country is like whether women are educated. So it may not, and it's just like, like you look at Afghanistan, and that's one of the things that had held that country back for a long time. It's one of the good things that we've done there. It makes the, like, if we're going to get out question very complicated. I know we had a science fiction author, Madeline Ashby, who I've worked with, who's just been great at like, also just like being like, hey, her work is about thinking about the other and like adding that stuff into it. So it's not just a bunch of like, white dude military fanboys, like who are just being like, yeah, but wouldn't it be cool if you did this to kill people? Like it's just been really, and everybody's just been really smart and really open to ideas. And so I've written some short stories for them, like prose short stories. I've taught, like I've gotten to go to the Air Force's like graduate school, the Air University. I just taught in the fall, like a short class at Quantico, the Marine Corps headquarters, and I've been working with them to do they published one and they're doing another, like a graphic novel that's like future stories that are written and drawn all by people in the Marine Corps. And that's just the really fun thing for me, because as much as I like to write, I've just been so impressed by the talent of those people. Like, yeah. And it's like, their day jobs are really hard, like yeah. It's not like they're just, okay. I mean, that, like, look, not that, there's bad day jobs. It's just like, okay, like their day jobs are life and death. And it's like, right. Oh, that they can take the time and that they're really thinking about serious things, that it's just very inspiring to me. And it's influenced my work. Like I've gotten to, I can reach out to people for research that I never thought I'd be able to talk to. And it's just been really fun.
It's great. I mean, it definitely shows. I would ask what your research process is, but it just seems like you kind of explained it in some ways. It's like, do you dip into a lot of military things though? Besides this work, do you have any military background, or is that something that you have in your history besides the current?
No. And I think, it's interesting because I think that's part of, in some way, what drives me is, I think, having lived in New York during 9/11 and having never served, and this is, we were told after 9/11, like, I think it was this great moment where we could have been asked to like sacrifice. Like, it was one of those few moments in my lifetime that I feel like, oh, everybody felt like, we're all in this together. And right, yeah. We kind of weren't. And, knowing military people, it's like, we have this great all volunteer military. I respect them so much. But besides them and their families, like, it's such a small percentage of people who sacrifice. And I think I feel like this kind of, guilt about it. Like, it's a weird, like, survivor's guilt or something. I mean, I have an interest in it in any way, but I feel it's one of those things that makes me feel compelled to like tell those kinds of stories again, which is why, like, okay, I'm happy helping the Marine Corps tell their story. So it's not just me like using them for research.
No, that's good. I mean, that's all the better writer that you are. I'm interested in this term. I've seen some profiles or bios of you that you identify as a futurist. I think that's a super interesting idea of somebody that at least believes in this idea of like that there is positive outcomes that could happen in the future, whether it be through technology, and that we're not all just like doomed by social media and stuff, or however somebody would describe a futurist. Like, what does that mean to you if you do identify with that?
It's something that I've just started to identify, because I didn't know how to best say, like, if I said like consultant, right? Like, first of all, it's kind of boring, but it doesn't really describe the breadth of what I do. And I felt like that's the connective tissue, because it's not all military stuff that I'm consulting with. Like, I, there's the Institute for, it was Human Machine Cognition in Pensacola, Florida. Like, and I, did some think tank work with them, and like, and also Airbus, which is this like European manufacturer. And so the connecting thread, even though Godkillers is maybe not the best example of it in terms of, because it's not science fiction, but the connecting thread, I think, generally is like, it's all this like speculative stuff. So I don't claim to have any expertise in terms of like predicting stuff, but I do feel like, but I think, the idea is like, is not to try to like, I'm not trying to be like a weatherman, like, and predict the future, but really to just like help people think more creatively about the future. Cause that's something I do know how to do. And I'm just fascinated by. And, sometimes like there's plenty of things to be scared about. But I also think there are wonderful, look, technology it's always been something that's been used for like, good and evil. I think it's in itself, it's neutral. It's like how we use it. But so, I think the last like major book that I had come out was this book called The Dark that I did with Kristian Donaldson at Comixology Originals, which was about like, which was very directly inspired by that kind of work, where it was about what happens if there's
no technology. Is that right?
Yeah, it's sort of. So it was like there's a cyber attack. The grid, not only does the internet go down, but the grid goes down. So the world is rebuilding, and people are shifting now from silicon-based technology like computers to biotechnology. And then like within that world, there's a story, and it was like a lot of it came from just that kind of thinking, and I enjoy doing that kind of thinking, whether it's for writing, which is has been and always will be my first love, and but at the same time, I enjoy having that back and forth with these people that I do the think tank work with, whether it's military people, whether it's people in intelligence or scientists, or just other creative people, and seeing how they think. So it's been fun, and it's been a way of like, I don't know, just combining all the things that I'm interested in, and making me also feel that like, I don't know, writing is such a solitary profession, and it can sometimes feel a little bit selfish, maybe, that like, I'm not saying like, look, I'm not, I'm not like feeding the poor or like, donating blood or something, but it does feel in some way like giving back, which feels nice.
Separately, and if this doesn't work, then we'll just cut it out. But one thing that this book reminded me of, your comic book, was there was a 2016 movie called Under the Shadow, which I don't know if you are familiar with or not.
I am not.
Okay,
but I'm interested in hearing about it.
Well, it's a military. Or sorry, it's not a. It's a wartime movie that happens, and so there's a family that's just living in an apartment, but then they summon a djinn of sorts, and it like haunts them or haunts the like apartment, and it becomes about like a ghost in the house, although it's a wartime movie of sorts. And what it reminded me, or what it really like hit home for me, is like the reverence of spirituality and folklore in a time of war, and how those like things come together and like make you appreciate that. And I didn't know if that's like how you got there to like the spirituality and folklore in a time of war, or I'm curious how you did arrive at that across the road.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. I don't think that's how I got there. I have to think back, because it's always, I think sometimes like as you go forward, it's easy to forget how you got there. And also like, I think I sometimes rewrite the story of how I got there in my own head. But I think a lot of it came from just personally the thought of like my own fears of like, the main character, although like I'm a Jewish American and he's an Arab American, like I think at the core, like I feel like he's very much part of me, which is like this idea that like, okay, like I'm really fascinated by the supernatural, but I'm not really a believer. But at the same time, if you tell me a ghost story, I will not sleep tonight. And so
yeah, I understand
think that's part of that is part of where it came from. But it's also like, I also felt like, oh, here's this reservoir of untapped, like, yes, zombies have been done to death and I'm part of it, right? Like, I've been part of that. And like, certain other like folklore has come, but like, here's all this, there's all this stuff that like I was interested in learning about. I think, it probably came more from thinking about like, okay, like there's a podcast I listen to called Popular Front, which is this conflict journalist who interviews other conflict journalists. And so a lot of it came from like hearing about these, like I said, like the insurgency in the Philippines, like stuff going on in Syria that I didn't know about, and and Ukraine and some other places, and thinking, okay, like, well, yeah, I want to have this globe-trotting band, and like, where are places that I can take them that will be new and interesting to the reader as well as myself? And it's like, yes, there's the surface conflict, and then there's like these, then there's always this folklore stuff, and there's like, it's interesting because I think there's so much unique stuff. Like, I mean, I hope we get to do another arc because I have ideas for like plenty of other countries and things to take the story. But even though we get around a fair bit in this, and there's a lot of differences, but there's also a lot of similarities. And I think there's something, even though they're like, these are monsters, but it's like, every culture like has some version of like a vampire in some way, right? Like, and they have their unique spin on it. And I think you could look at that negatively and say like, well, okay, we all have the same fears, but I'm also like, well, is something we have in common, right? And I think that's the thing I've been fortunate enough to travel a fair amount. I mean, I've been to the Middle East only a little bit. I haven't been to the Philippines, although I have a lot of family there. But it's, I think the thing you learn when you do travel is like, you get to talk to people one-on-one. They're almost always, just great, no matter how different you think your culture, your politics, or everything is. And especially, I'd say in the Middle East, having been there, like, man, they're just like, the people in that region are among the most hospitable in the world. Like, really have made me feel at home. Like, just to give you an example, like so the last time I was in the Middle East was Dubai there's a Comic-Con in Dubai called the Middle East Film and Comic-Con, which I went to twice. First time was great. The second time I was there, I was partnering with local people in the United Arab Emirates to do like basically the first comic that had ever been published there, or at least I believe it is. Mm-hmm. So I was working with Arabs, like Emiratis there. And then we had an Italian artist. It was a really international team. But so I get there and like, I had a day to kill before the convention started. Like, I got in a little earlier than everybody else. And I had heard the last year that I went, people went on this like desert safari that I didn't get to go on. So I was like, oh, I want to do that. And so I go and like, I went on an ATV for the first and last time in my life. And I got thrown off of it and I shattered my right humerus.
Oh my gosh.
So I had to be like get out of the desert first, because I wasn't even in the city at this point, like back, and then flown back to the States. But having been there just once, the people that I had met, like one who was a convention organizer, another who was a comic creator, like I'd only met these people once, and they came like from whatever they were doing, rushed to the hospital and stayed with me.
Oh, wow.
And it really made this tremendous impact. And in fact, so I had one of them, this artist whose name is Leilani Coughlin. She's a Filipino citizen of I don't know if she's a citizen of the US. She's a Filipino of like English Filipino, but who's a Muslim. She was one of the two sensitivity readers I had this, because I knew I knew, not being a Muslim, as much research or an Arab, like as much research as I can do, like there's always something I'm going to miss, or, there may be some cultural taboo I'm aware of. And, look, even with that happening, even with sensitivity readers, the Muslim world, the Arab world is huge. Like I can very easily make a mistake, but
right.
I at least wanted to, do my due diligence in the same way. Like, yeah, you want to like get military stuff right. I mean, all that said, like, I try as much as I can for accuracy with the military stuff. If it's a choice between the story being interesting and being like somebody's got to use the wrong kind of gun, like I'm going to make the story more fun.
Yeah.
But I do care, because I do know that there are people that care, and I'm sure that I've gotten things wrong. I'm sure that I've gotten things wrong, and that people will tell me. But
well, like and stuff with that, like that, I think you'll agree. It's good to get it vetted so you don't, offend people, because you're telling a great, amazing story here, and it'd be a bummer to upset some people by the littlest thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. I think even well-meaning people, it's like the climate of discussion around things can get, I mean, I'm not complaining like I'm being censored or something at all. Like,
right.
I think it's great like there needs to be more points of view, and like people like me need to listen, but it's just like, but it is hard. Like and it's something I worry about a tremendous amount, is like, I really don't, and I do, because I do know for people like, when you're not represented a lot, like, and then you see yourself represented, like it's gonna mean a lot. So I can only try my best, and like, and just hope, listen as much as I can, and hope it works.
Yeah, well, I think in Godkillers you nailed a very genuine and relatable story. I want to move on a little bit to Mark Sable, the person, and things that make you tick, and all of that kind of stuff. You've had your time writing for the big two a little bit with some Two-Face, some Spider-Man, Supergirl, things like that. I'm wondering, like, what books as a kid inspired you or got you into comics? And maybe it was superhero stuff, or maybe it wasn't.
It wasn't. So, I mean, like, the two books I remember getting doing the monthly thing. And in fact, I remember actually back when Marvel used to do their, like, you could cut out like a thing and actually like get a physical subscription where Marvel itself would mail you the book. So G.I. Joe was probably the first book I started reading regularly. So like, you can see that obviously. And then X-Men, which I started reading from, I want to say, issue 200. I'm still reading it. And I mean, nice. I went back and I got the back issues. So, I mean, there's plenty of that, like, that's the early stuff. And then of course, like, later you discover Dark Knight and Watchmen, which I'm sure everybody says, and Sandman. But it's true. I mean, I think, those are all, those are all influences on me. But those were like the two earliest ones where, I mean, I'd read comics before that. And I remember, I think an Avengers issue was my first comic, but like, those were the two books that really got me like, okay, I need to know what happens next month. And like, I can't miss an issue. And, that I've been lucky that like that bug has stayed with me. And, even luckier that like I've gotten to write, to write comics in general and those characters. I mean, the funny thing is, like, to give you an idea of how much of a comics fan I was, or how much of a nerd I was, however you want to put it. So the theme of my bar mitzvah was Marvel Comics. So,
yes,
there were these big like cardboard cutouts of like,
Can you tell us what year this was, just to paint a picture?
So yeah, I mean, oh man, it'll date me, but so I want to say, okay, I have to do the math of like, this is 1988.
Okay.
So it was interesting because it was all the like
that's the
Marvel
OG
character
Marvel.
was trying new. Yeah, but it was like Marvel was at the time like trying like, let's give Thor a beard. Let's Spider-Man's in the black costume. Yeah. I feel like Captain America was still Captain America, but he's about to become U.S. agent. So for me, like, we had a caricaturist, which was really awesome. And actually, the more I think about it, like, it was really so wonderful of my parents to like indulge this and not just hide me away. But and so then the caricaturist, we gave out these T-shirts that said I had a Marvel and Marvel in all caps.
Oh my God, that sounds so awesome.
But wait, it gets better and on the shirt is a picture of me as a 13-year-old like scrawny kid with thick glasses, but wearing Iron Man's Silver Centurion armor, but holding the helmet so you can see my glasses.
Of course.
So I guess they're collector's items now.
I would say so.
But it's one of the wonderful things is like, it was not cool to be into comics then, and it's been nice to see like that, like, oh, like, and just even in the time I've been in comics. So I think Grounded, my first book, came out in 2005. Like, not about it being cool so much, but just to see like, oh, how much society is accepting of so many things, but one of them being just like, nerd culture, whether it's comics or Dungeons and Dragons, and right. Seeing that like, yeah, like, and now there's so much of a more diverse audience. Like, it's just been great. So, and I'm lucky to be along on the ride.
Yeah, it's definitely come around to just like being a nerd is just kind of indulging in culture at this point.
As lifetime comic book fans, we're kind of we're really happy that we're kind of being more accepted into the landscape of society with our cool nerd stuff that people like now.
What are some stuff? I mean, I guess you're still reading, so like, what's some stuff that's inspiring you now or that you like?
Oh boy, yeah, it's a good question because I still read. I buy more books than I'm reading. just because
Us
I think
too.
of like there's so many good things. Okay, that makes me feel better. Like I feel guilty about this. Like I'm happy to support the creators. At the same time, like I feel guilty of like, oh, like I'm taking too much space up. But anyway, so let me think. So with the caveat to any of my creator friends who are listening, if I'm leaving you out, I apologize.
Oh no.
But so like the first thing that comes to mind is Michel Fife's Copra.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah.
Which is just amazing. Like the fact that he does everything on it.
Oh, it's so bonkers.
And it's just like, I mean, so for anybody who is not listening, like the very, like the simple way to say it is, it's like this like homage to like Suicide Squad comics of the 80s, but like he makes it its own thing and creates his own universe. And Michel writes, draws, inks, colors, letters it. I mean, and until now was self-publishing. Like literally I would get from him like in the mail the book, and now Image is publishing it, which is, I know saves him time to go to the post office.
Oh, I'm sure.
And gets him in the hand of more readers. I love Kieran Gillen's Die. DIE. I love role playing games, and so and it's just I think it's one of the best things he's done, and I love Stephanie Hahn's art in that book. Oh, and what else? Oh, and Hickman's X-Men. I guess it's a cliched answer, but I was so impressed with, man, like I've been reading X-Men for so long, and I had gotten to a point where like, I'd really cut down on it. There were too many books with too many titles. I didn't know if anything original could be done. And boy, was I was like, wow, nope.
Yeah.
It's because that's, having worked in, it's so hard to like, although my preference is creator-owned comics, like I recognize how hard it is to write for the big two. Like you're satisfying so many masters of like,
right.
Not just your editor, but like a group editor and other people's characters and the fans. And like, you're trying to tell a unique story, but within the confine, but there's some confines there. And, not every creator can do it. Writing it just suddenly gave me a respect for like all these times I would think like, oh, this person is a hack. I was like, well, you know what? Like, like it's a lot easier to say that from the outside. Like, oh, now I realize how hard it is to do. So anyway, yeah, I was been just really impressed by that. I'm sure that I am leaving stuff out.
Well, you named some of our favorite books, so it sounds like
we've ruined probably about 3 episodes screaming over House of X and Powers of X, just all the theories and whatnot when it was going on. So we're right there with you.
So you've written in a lot of different mediums, and you're a DM, so that takes writing as well. This is definitely like your passion. Do you have a place where you feel most at home writing? Is it like straight comics and the other stuff just kind of, if it happens, great, or do you have a preference?
I think it depends. I mean, I've enjoyed doing all of it. I think I would say, the only thing that holds me back from saying comics like unequivocally is just like, out of all the other mediums that you've mentioned, it pays the least. And, like just realistically, like it's like, that's part of why I do other things like teach or do the futurist stuff. Although I enjoy those things very much as well. Like, I wrote a pilot in the past year and I've gotten to write for TV. I would love to do that. I like watch a ton of TV at the same time. Like it's hard to imagine, even if I was like running a television show, that I wouldn't find some place in my life for comics. If there was a nostalgia aspect to it, I think that's probably worn off. I mean, not that I don't enjoy, again, like reading X-Men and something, or that I wouldn't enjoy writing for it, but it's just, I don't know, the flip side of there not being as much money is like, in creator-owned comics, I've been given so much freedom and I'm so appreciative of it. At the same time, it's also this great collaborative medium. And I always tell people, like, my favorite part of comics, I mean, look, I'm so excited to have an issue out in a week from when this is being recorded. But my favorite part of the process is seeing the art come back. And I've been so fortunate to work with such great artists. Like, it is a solitary profession. Like, I work from home, which in LA is great. You don't have traffic, which is, is as bad as they say. But like, I will tell you, almost without exception, when I get art back, it's not only as good as I imagined, it's almost always better. and then I can then like take when I get designs or when I get pages, like, oh, then I can try to write more towards that artist. But I love, there's just, I mean, there are great things about working in all the mediums, but I am, and of course, like anybody else, like I've had stuff optioned. I would love for more stuff to be optioned. Again, I'd love to work in TV, to do more work in TV, but like I am aware of how great it is. I mean, the other parts of it are just like, I don't know, comic fans are just special. Like, I feel like we're talking, we can talk about our excitement for it in ways that you just, I don't know, you don't see. And, again, going to conventions or signings, like you get to interact with, fans and other readers and other creators. Like the smallness of the industry is something else that, there can be negative to that too. If like, you don't like somebody or somebody doesn't like you or, whatever else, but mostly like almost everybody that I've met's been really great. And I'm like, it's just fun to spend time with them. So yeah, I do, I guess, as I talk it out, I feel like, yeah, comics is something that is really special to me.
I have an interest. I mean, you kind of talked about it, but it seems like a lot of comic book creators are unabashedly fans and fans of lots of things. And I saw that you contributed to the comic book Tattoo Tales, the Tori Amos book. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I have to assume you're a fan of Tori Amos. Like, what other music fan? Like, what is your fandom? What do you stan about?
So I have to say, like, music is one of the areas where I feel like as I've gotten older, I've kind of maybe lost touch. So like, so many of my music fandom is like Beatles or, so classic rock stuff or like 90s hip hop, like Beastie Boys. And so I feel like I haven't, or Tribe Called Quest. So like, I feel like I haven't caught up. Whereas, let's say TV, I feel like I love that we're living in this era of quote unquote peak TV. And like, I could talk forever about like, I like the Watchmen adaptation, although there's issues about Alan Moore about that's a whole other thing. But just like, man, I watched so much amazing stuff last year. Like Mindhunter, there's a show called Patriot that I'd highly recommend. Like if you like spy stuff, it's on Amazon Prime. There's 2 seasons of it, unfortunately only 2, but it's an amazing show. So like, I'm also, discussing like, yeah, I'm a dungeon master. Like I love this, like indie role-playing games. Like that's what I'm super fascinated about. Actually, one of the fun things was like with with Kieran Gillen's Die is like, he created this role-playing game for it. That's, I got to like, I proofread it, like just as a friend, but then like I got to play in a session that he ran after New York Comic Con with some other creators and comic adjacent people. And he's so like, he's as a lovely a person as you'd imagine he would be, and a great a game master in this sense. I don't want to, it's hard to talk about the game without spoiling the comic, but check out the comic. And if you like it and you can find the game, I forget how available it is, but I think it's out there and it's just a really unique take on it. So yeah. And then, like, man, I love Lego. Like I love,
oh, nice.
I still like, I'm looking at all this Lego Star Wars stuff in my apartment, and thinking like, how much do I have to hide to get a girlfriend again? Like, but like I there's so many things like, and just like reading in general, like, and I'd say like, I am interested in the geeky stuff about like, the military or espionage and things like that. And like just reading, whether it's historical stuff or future stuff or present day stuff. Like I love reading about that stuff. So like the good part about doing the fun, it's like my research to me is mostly fun. The only bad part about it is like, it takes up so much of my time. And I think that's why like part of why my comic reading is not as much as that maybe used to be.
So, Mark, you're a professor at SVA, or are you currently teaching there? Is that right?
I'm teaching there. Yeah, I guess I'm like, people call me professor. I don't actually know that that's my job title. I teach two classes there with another creator actually. So I teach. It's a program called the Master in Fine Arts and Visual Narrative, which is it basically deals with anything that is visual and has a story. So it can be, my students do like comics, they can do picture books, they can do like live action video. They can do animation. They can do interactive stuff. I really like that it's broad and that people can like go between mediums, because that's something I've done in my career. So I teach a fall writing class, and then while parallel to me, an artist named Jim Rugg, who you might know from Street Angel, he's an indie, not just an artist. He's a writer artist. He's a cartoonist. And he does that comics. He's half of Comics Kayfabe on YouTube with Ed Piskor. So Jim teaches a parallel art course, and in the spring, which is now, we combine and we do this class called Digital Short Story, where grad students both write and draw or film or animate their stories. And it's really, that's also inspiring. Like, it's a lot of work, and anything that fights for my writing sometimes gets a little bit of resentment from that part of my brain, but I'm also just tremendously inspired. Like, the SVA is great about like getting a really diverse student body, a lot of international students. So in fact, I can't announce the project yet, but there's an artist that was a former student of mine named Feifei Ruan, who's from China. And I'm going to be doing a project with her. Like, I waited until she graduated because I didn't want it to feel like, oh, there was some sort of pressure to work while like I'm a professor, but like she's just great. So we're going to be doing a project. I can just say that it has to do with like, it's like a historical fiction in Shanghai. It's a massive undertaking, but besides that, it's just like, it gets me excited to see, like, I want to say young, but like sometimes the students are older than me. I mean, most of them are younger, but like just all these new voices, and, it's the thing I can't teach. Like, I can teach them like story structure, or like, here's some techniques to like maybe write better dialogue, or, or this or that. But like, I can't teach them like their own voices. And I love discovering new comics. It's like, that's the fun part of my job, is like seeing what they come up with, and then trying to do that balance of like imparting whatever wisdom I can and trying to help them, but at the same time getting out of their way, so that like, I don't want to tell them like I don't want them to tell my story. I want them to tell the best version of their story. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, Mark, I had a hunch that you were a good person. You've convinced me that you were a good person. You're also a talented person. It has been great talking to you. Your book comes out in a week. What's that Wednesday like for you? Doing a signing? You're just gonna go into the shop incognito?
So not doing this. I'm gonna do a signing. So I want to say it's Saturday, February 21st. If people are listening to this from LA, at Golden Apple in LA, which is a great store.
Yeah.
It's my local comic store. I'll be doing it that Saturday, not that Wednesday. It just seems to work better for everybody. I will be there that Wednesday. Absolutely. I'll be incognito. I mean, I won't be wearing a name tag, but like, it's the kind of local friendly comic shop that like all the people that work there know me. Other creators come in there sometimes. So I won't be, if anybody sees me and recognizes me somehow, like, please say hi. Like, I'm not hiding, but I'm also, I don't want to be like, attention, get a megaphone and attention everyone and point to it. But it is like, look, it's something that, man, like, I still can't get over. Like, if I walk into like a bookstore or a comic store, especially if it's in some place other than, where I live, and I see one of my books, I still flip out. Like, it still feels really, it's surreal to me. And I'm still like, again, just feel so lucky. This business is so hard that like, oh, people still want to print my stuff and buy my stuff and read it. So I'll be just doing that, and then probably checking social media against my better judgment.
Cool. Well, we're super pumped. It is a great book, and we highly recommend it.
Yeah, we do this show every week. We've been doing it for 3 years, every week. And this book has probably been one of the most surprising and intriguing books that we've read in a very long time. The hook ending for this was so good, and it has me, ready to read the rest of this series.
And I had seen in some preview on my like feed, it showed the cover to issue 2. And when I was reading this book, I was just like, how the fuck do we get to that? So it's great. I mean, You've written a really good piece here.
Because it's so much more than just like this military monster hunting story. You have this like secondary story going on about, faith and doubt of faith and, doubt of maybe I should have a faith now from these demons showing up. So, I mean, just really, really complex and like interesting stuff. And I mean, really excited to read it and to have you on to talk about it.
Thank you so much for having me. It means a lot. The sad, or not the sad part, the bad part of like there being so many good books out is it's very hard to cut through it. And so I really appreciate you giving me and other creators a platform. I should just want to also shout out Jeremy Hahn, who I know has been a guest of yours and who does do the covers for, he and Nick Filardi do the covers for Godkillers, and they're great. So yeah, I'm glad that second cover grabbed you.
Please plug everything you got right now. Where can people find you? Do you have any upcoming projects you want to plug? I mean, just now is your time to do that.
Oh yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, so okay. If you want to find me, I'm at Mark Sable, both on Twitter and Instagram, and that's MarkSable. And please hit me up, especially on Twitter. I'm happy to respond unless it's super personally mean. And even then I'll probably still try to
so normal Twitter.
Yeah, so normal Twitter. In terms of books, so I can't announce anything that I have coming out, but I had a couple books come out in the fall that I feel like have not gotten a ton of press, and that I think if you like Godkillers, people might want to check out. One is we mentioned was The Dark through Comixology Originals, which is this near future sci-fi about what happens after the internet and the grid goes out and biotech takes over, and then a book which I did a Kickstarter for, but is also on Comixology Originals, called Dracula, Son of the Dragon, which is basically how did Vlad the Impaler, the historical Vlad the Impaler, become the the vampire known as Dracula. Both are on Comixology Originals, and what's great is if you've got Amazon Prime or Kindle Unlimited, they're free,
nice.
I believe. But if not, they're very inexpensive. They're both like graphic novel length, and they're if you like reading comics digitally, eventually hopefully there'll be print stuff. But for now, like they're good, and I'm super proud of my work on both, and they both involve either military or horror or both. So hopefully there's some crossover there.
So, we just had a great interview with Mark Sable and his new book that comes out, or that I guess came out today.
It's coming out this week.
Yeah, Godkillers on Aftershock, and we'll be talking about it. And we were so lucky to get to talk to Mark. He's done so many things, and this book in general, I think, is going to have a ton of surprises. One of the most solid first issues I've read
in a long time.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, go buy all of his books now. Go buy them twice, actually.
Cool.
Mark, thank you again for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. It's genuinely been a pleasure, really.
Cool.
You guys are awesome.
All right.
All right. See you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Yep.